We will call this meeting to order. I am Charlie Gadzik, Chair of the Planning Commission. This is the August 23rd, 2023 meeting. We'll begin with a flag salute, if you will join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Senior Planner Fitzgibbons, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Mersch.
Present.
Commissioner Quigg. Here. Commissioner Danzler.
Here.
Commissioner Lowe. Here. Commissioner Van Atta.
Here.
Vice Chair Kennard.
Present.
And Chair Gadzik.
Present. Commissioners, you have the agenda in front of you. Are there any changes to be made to the agenda as it's been presented? Okay, seeing none, we'll consider that approved. Also before you are the minutes of the July meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? All right, again, no, all heads are in approval, so we will consider those approved. That brings us to the public comment period. Individuals may speak for up to 3 minutes at the podium. Please state your name and your neighborhood when you begin your comment. And I know we have someone in the audience. Would you like to make a comment now, sir?
Establish a little bit of relevancy.
Why don't you, oh yeah, you can bring that up if you like, sure.
You guys can pass these out. I didn't think quite enough.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, the plan to that,
But if you go to the podium there, then we'll be able to hear, and your voice will get going on the recording, on the record too.
my name is Jason Jordan. I live in Newcastle now at Castle Creek Apartments across the street. And I wanted to establish the fact that people in our neighborhoods are getting comfortable who are friends with Gary Ridgway. And they hunted me and stalked me. And so when I divulged to the world that the property that was in Renton, which is now in Newcastle, should be used to let the families know where the first 4 bodies that started the Green River investigation came from, right in Newcastle, so they can get closure and then continue the investigation and finally close it. It's not closed. He also had friends, which makes this a public safety concern. They're highly aggressive. They stalked me. One of their friends drove a knee so hard through my stomach, he almost severed my spinal cord. He tore my spleen. I've been living a terror campaign underneath my own self-imposed witness protection program, delaying all my accomplishments and all my milestones ever since high school. Every aggressive male that came at me, I had to adapt. I am that creature. I am Jordan. I am the Pacific Northwest's influencer. I'm the original Ken Griffey Jr., the original Russell Wilson. I wrestled Bruce Lee's cousin. Jimi Hendrix's sister, secret sister, sleeps in my old bedroom. I'm cousins with the largest rapper in the world, Scarface. He wants to move up here and take over everything I've done. My whole family might be involved. My dad worked right next to Gary Ridgway for 5 years. Kenworth must have known. Anyway, Gary Ridgway's original body dump site was right over here in Newcastle, right down at the bottom of Spring Hill. His original rape site was 400 yards down, and the ones that made it into the special spot where the bodies were stacked up, and the ones that had to leave first after I ran across Gary Ridgway's gravesite while he was committing necrophiliac as a 10-year-old. I ran across his body while he was committing necrophiliac in this gravesite, and Gary Ridgway stalked me ever since with my 2 friends, and they're still out there. The hallowed grounds that we established as buddies have 2 schools built on them. Newcastle's and Renton's is brand new. I think we're headed for a crisis here. Disaster preparedness starts here. You guys should budget your 10% contingency plans to use that to grade the valley slower so you don't wreck the bones. I think bodies 51 through 21 are out there. I outweighted Gary Ridgway.
That's That's 3 minutes there. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Is there anybody online who wishes to make a comment? Do we have anybody listening online? No? Okay. We'll close the public comment period then. Move to commissioner comments. Commissioners, I'll just let any of you who wish to comment raise your hand, and Commissioner Quigg.
I just wanted to say that on September 16th at Risden Middle School, we'll be having a fundraiser hosted by Tony Ventrella, attended by our fabulous mayor and chief, and we're going to raise money to help the wildfire victims out in Hawaii. Also, well done on the penny poll, whoever thought that up. I think it was you, Charlie. Who thought this up? I don't know. Whose idea? The consultant. The consultant is brilliant because that seems like it was very, very well received, and so well done on that. And thank you to all the commissioners who attended the parks events and art walk and, talked to all the people that came up and talked to us. So thank you. And Aaron, good seeing you there too.
Commissioner Lawrence? Sorry. Amy?
Yeah, I just wanted to second the comments about the penny poll. I was thinking about that on my way here, that was, I think it was the consultant's idea, but it just worked so well as a conversation starter. It was so easy to get people to come to the table. It just wasn't even hard. People were interested to talk about the vision of Newcastle for the next 20 years, and frankly, they were interested to come to the town hall that we're planning tonight. So at least the people that I talked to. So looking forward to that conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner Dantzler. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move to reports, and I do have a...
Really quick.
Oh, yes.
Do we have one more person with public comment? I know we already closed it, but somebody just showed up. I don't want to.
Oh, no.
Okay, sorry. I thought.
Asking them?
You're welcome. Welcome.
We do have, I believe, another comment period at the end of our meeting, so. So I guess this is not so much a report, but a comment having to do with the use of social media to promote the comprehensive plan public involvement. So we've had an example of how effective social media is at getting people to respond. Commissioner Quigg posted a link to the city's webpage where people could go and post comments. And I don't know how many went to the webpage, but a lot of them took the opportunity to make comments right on Facebook. Unfortunately, there are complications with using Facebook that way. It creates complications with having a recoverable public record. But the city and the commission are not really using social media very much to promote the comprehensive plan. I don't know how to improve that situation, but I think there may be ways to improve it. And what I'd like to suggest is that I meet with Director Hoffman, and if other commissioners want to join me, we would have a conversation where we kind of explore what is possible and practical, because some of the things that might be good ideas may have implications that commit the staff to do things that they may or may not be able to do given the resources that are available. But so I'd like to have that conversation. Director Hoffman's open to it. So if up to 2 of you would like to join us, because so I see Commissioner Van Natta raised his hand. Okay, we've got 2. If the rest of you are interested, I don't know if we could have another meeting, but I think that's actually not allowed either. We can't have sequential meetings, but we can have that meeting. Those of you who are not going to be there, we'll come back and tell you what we talked about and what the potential possibilities are, what the limitations are, and maybe we'll have that for our, if we have time on our agenda in our September meeting, we can revisit that. Community Director Hoffman, your report.
Thank you. Verbal report tonight, 2 updates that you may be aware of if you read the city manager's updates to city council, so forth. Energize East Side. You've no doubt know what that is and have seen it. This week, they're finishing the final pilings or posts, the primary construction. What you're going to see at the end of this week is the beginning of the stringing of the new wire on the west side. If that goes well, they will then spend about 3 days to string the east side, and we'll be inspecting along with the pipeline company. That will be the end of the primary construction. The project will continue into the fall, cleanup, demobilization, revegetation, monitoring. So we'll keep providing updates for another week or two while the primary project continues. But at that point, the flaggers and the on-street type things will start disappearing. So far, so good. Second one you may have experienced this past weekend is the I-405 closure project. We have a very small exposure to that as staff, permit-wise. Most of the work's in the right-of-way. They're going to have one more closure for September 8th through Monday morning, the 11th. The two roles that the city played in the current work are a request for noise variation, extended work hours for the portion that's inside the city. We granted that last weekend. We will grant it for September 8th. Some of the critical areas work extends outside the right-of-way into the city, and they're revising that footprint and the mitigation. We're also on that. Beyond that, what's in the right-of-way is WashDOT jurisdiction. And we support the project, but it has local impacts, and the one you may have seen this weekend is the traffic on Coal Creek. So staff's been talking about that, seeing if there's any opportunities for the next closure, which also happens to be Newcastle Days. So we're very aware that it's coming and are open to any suggestions. We're encouraged that the Coal Creek Parkway traffic was at least moving. And while we can't prevent or get in the way of the I-405 closure, awareness and any measures inside the city manager's willing to take. And then that's it. We're not aware of any other closures or impactful work to this community outside the right-of-way after that.
I'm curious, have you received any complaints about the poles going in?
Yes.
Like in the past week? Because, I mean, it's been the headline news in this city forever, right? And now it's happened. I drive under them I live over there, so I drive them back and forth under them all the time. I'm just curious if you guys have received, I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time. Now it's here. I'm just curious what you guys have heard from the citizens.
Scott and I rolled in, when all the permitting was there, and we have the luxury of saying, hey, we're just implementing a project that's approved. But we've been exposed to groups or individuals that have not gone away. And that continues regularly. But I can also clarify there have been no new comments in the last 3-4 weeks specific to, wow, those poles, I'm just seeing this for the first time, this pole is ugly. Nothing of that category. All the interaction is based on prior reports, prior information, monitoring, and we responded in kind.
What have you heard from citizens about how PSC has conducted itself in making the changes along the corridor? I mean, they're impacting property owners. Do you have a sense of how well they've been performing?
From what I've seen, there have been no valid issues whatsoever. There's been a lot of communication, a lot of assertions, but the PSC teams doing various tasks and their outreach have been stellar. The pipeline company is somewhat less transparent because it's a Homeland Security issue, but they are present. And while we don't receive a lot of feedback or reporting from them, their presence and silence is a good thing. So those are the primary bodies on the project. We hear often questions and feedback from adjacent neighbors. PSC is doing a really good outreach job. If they're going to do a vegetation or a matting project in the easement in anyone's proximity or rear yard, they communicate that morning and the week before. So with that communication, nothing has risen past that. Any sort of check-in or questions been answered before it happens. And we've received no specific feedback that anything was done and proven wrong.
Anything else under your report? That brings us to general business and the wireless code update. Back to you, Director.
I streamlined my my items tonight. Let's see if I can stick to it. As you're aware, we're doing the small wireless code updates. We now have draft language. It's not analyzed yet, but it's highly detailed. So I thought tonight would be an opportunity to get you that draft language. You can start to read it so that when we come back in September, the discussion and our next steps are a little bit better informed instead of bringing it all at once and asking you what you would like to do. So I thought I would include 3 things in your packet tonight and discuss them, but then have no expectation that you would have read them or have questions. If you have any questions, we can collect them or try and answer them tonight. The first item are 2 definitions that I think you'll find helpful in the existing code. This effort is small wireless. It's not macro. Macro is in the code. Those definitions are in the code for macro. Poles, wireless facilities on the utility pole. Small cell is separate from that. So the second document you have is the existing wireless code, again, that I'll summarize as macro wireless. The third item is the initial drafting of the small wireless. And that's the primary item to read in the next 4 weeks for September, highly technical. Yes, sir.
Who developed this?
The city has a contract with Daniel Kenny, who's a subject matter expert. I can't recall his firm right now, but he's a specialist that's been going to local jurisdictions for the last 10 years, both on macro and micro. Our contract with him is not to exceed $15,000 specific to this work item, which is small wireless. The urgency has not been seen, but this contract will prepare the city, insert small wireless into the code with Daniel Kenny. Planning Commission gives a recommendation, and then we go to City Council hopefully later in the year.
Thank you. I was just curious whether this was modeled after any other city's adopted code.
It is, but it's tailored to what is seen in our current code as far as processes and our community. But it's I don't want to call it boilerplate. It's means tested by many other cities in the region, many. Each jurisdiction has a different take on it. You know, Bainbridge Island kind of takes it to one extreme. Some other cities view it as a technical aspect. Let's do the minimum, get in code, and we'll deal with it when we get it. I believe that the attachment that you have achieves what we're trying to accomplish in the work item in a Newcastle style.
Along those same lines, we talked about wireless a while ago. We were kind of focused on like the aesthetics of it. You know, like would we put, light poles that, have everything kind of covered up? Does this cover any aesthetic type things?
Aesthetics will be a key part of small wireless to the extent that a local jurisdiction can control it. When we have those discussions, we'll highlight options and the flexibility. You'll have the ability to strengthen it, make it clearer, and we'll bring Daniel Kenny in person, and you could ask him specific questions like, what did this jurisdiction do? Why or why not? We don't have that for you yet. There are some serious risks involved And so I wouldn't say this is an extreme. This is a really good first attempt. And it may not be the final, but in order to get to that very question, we just need to dig in. But aesthetics is a big part, yeah. One last item on that. Macro. The second item they have in there is the existing wireless code, macro. There's a section in there requiring update and review every 3 years. The only thing I found is a report from a prior city planner more specific to small wireless. In thinking about that section in the existing code and this work effort and the contract not to exceed, the way the code is written, and for the record, I have it tagged here. If you're following along, it's section 18.25.090, periodic review. So it won't affect this contract or this small wireless. The small wireless is being developed to be accompanying what we already have. It's two different. It's not attempting to revise all the macro and add small wireless and say, here you go. So if you look at it as we have macro, we're introducing micro. What's becoming evident in doing that review for small, there are changes that we need to make to macro. The convenience of having this section 18.25090 is that review hasn't been done. So my suggestion is that we don't necessarily need to do it right now, but when we start talking about work plans or recommendations, the wording in that section says the Planning Commission can make that suggestion. It could be the city manager, the city council, the Planning Commission. So as you read through it, you may not run into something in macro that you think, oh, that should be revised. But we are finding, and Daniel Kenny is finding, that there have been recent changes, FCC orders and so forth, that we will come back as a separate work item, separate contract, and update the macro too, so that that's now consistent with current regulations. Again, not urgent, but if we do it over the winter or the first part of 2024, it's probably well advised.
Thank you. Assistant Planner Coyle, it is now time for housekeeping amendments.
Thank you. All right, so we discussed this at the last meeting, of course, and
Could you bring your microphone a little closer?
there we go. So we discussed this at the last meeting, of course, but in the time between then and now, there have been a few spaces where we've either found something else that we want to change or wanted to do a tweak to the first draft that we had at the last meeting. And so I was hoping to go through those briefly. There's only there's only 4 changes. If it's okay with all of you, I would like to focus just on what was added or changed and not go over things that just are standing from the last meeting.
Hey, Tyler?
Yeah?
Next week's not working. Should we move the TV or should we have it sit somewhere else? Oh, maybe we could turn them on. Oh. Hey, never mind, they weren't on. Where did you get that? Sorry.
How's that?
It wasn't a technology exam for the planning commission. All right, we're on. That was embarrassing. I'm sorry, Tyler.
Oh, no worries. Let's just. Oh, so they don't need this now. Okay. All right. So the first thing was.
Good. They can't see. We can see it now. Thank you.
Okay. So the first issue was for type 2 home occupation application requirements. So type 2 home occupation application is for a home-based business that is going to have more than 5 clients in a week. And they're a little bit less common, but we do get these from time to time. And we noticed that NMC 1830-090B requires applicants for a type 2 home occupation to go through a pre-application conference. Despite the city ending that policy several years ago, the administrative procedures that are housed in NMC 1909-010 explicitly exempt type 2 home occupations from pre-application conference, and that is the city's current policy. And so we wanted to get rid of this reference to a home or a pre-application conference requirement that no longer exists in the home occupation code. Yep.
During dinner time, when I was a kid, I just wanted to jump to dessert. So I feel ridiculous asking this question because I just want to get in the comp plan amendment stuff, but you got my attention, buddy. If so, just so I understand, I did not know what a type 2 home occupation thing was, but it sounds like if somebody's gonna have a business in their home, is that kind of easy way of putting it?
If somebody has a business in their home that is beyond a certain scope, so it would need to have more than 5 clients per week, but less than 20. So the very smallest, like somebody bakes cookies in their house and sells to a farmer's market, is not a type 2. That's a type 1, and it's a very simple approval. But say if somebody wants to have a barber shop in their house and have clients over, have like 10 clients a week or so, they would need to go through a type 2 home
And
occupation.
how often do people apply for that? Like in the
quite
past
rare.
10 years, is it like
Oh, I'm not
3
sure.
times maybe? Okay, cool. I'm just curious like how often this comes up, because it comes up in our neighborhood where people we have it in our neighborhood, and I hear about it with our HOA. So, people are talking about cars, and they're talking about traffic, and they're talking about safety, and they have all these, people coming up and saying, hey, Jim, what are you gonna do about it? So I'm just curious how frequently you actually get applications.
It's really not common,
Okay, that's
one a
fine.
year maybe.
Perfect, that's what I figured you'd say that. Okay, thank you so much, Tyler.
Yes. So for the next one, we found some more paper copy requirement references and binding site plan applications. It's 2005-040, sections G through L and N require them, and we want to remove them. We also we wanted to clarify this is another new one. Clarify the process for requesting alterations to construction hours. So, if you needed to put in a request to deviate from normal project hours, who handles that approval, or who works with the city manager to get that approval changes depending on where the project is. So if the project is inside the right-of-way, then it's the Public Works Director that's making the recommendation to the city manager. And conversely, if it's not in the public right-of-way and it's in a active building project or placed with an open permit application, the Community Development Director is the one who's making that recommendation, yea or nay, to the city manager. And that is that's our current policy, but the way that it is written in our code right now makes it a little bit unclear whose role it is to decide. And so we are just wanted to rewrite this so that it's clear to an applicant or a requester who they need, or who that process runs through.
It also specifically says building official, which is, there's nothing out of the ordinary there, but in this city, we contract that position out. So by having the Community Development Director or the Public Works Director, they're more directly tied to a recommendation to the city manager.
So I'm going to keep peppering you with questions, I'm sorry. So if somebody wants to do construction in the middle of the night, they got to talk to somebody in the city, right? Because we don't want people, because I was in a meeting where the mayor actually said that to the audience, saying, hey, just so you know, don't be running your lawnmower at 11:30 at night because we're going to get complaints. Is that kind of what this is about? And I'm just wondering, so if somebody wants to do construction at 4 a.m, they got to go to Mark?
Yes, so that would not is not allowed by our code. So if they wanted to get an exemption to mow their lawn at 4 a.m, then they would go to Mark if it were for a piece of land that has an active permit open on it. But if there's no active permit on it, then that review would run through Jeff in Public Works. Or if it were in the right-of-way, it would run through Jeff in Public Works.
Exactly. If it's a utility project or in the right-of-way, it's more directly related to what Public Works reviews. If it's a building permit or grading or construction or development, Community Development Director oversees all of those functions. The second category, lawn mowing, working on your own house at midnight, is also controlled by the noise regulations, but this is more specific to development. In doing that, we weigh the public benefit. A lot of it's expediency. If there's going to be a lot of noise, would we prefer it over 2 months, or is it a better benefit to the public to get it over with, and it's sewer related and it's public related? It's not a way of getting around the hours. It needs to be controlled and used for special circumstances, and that's why at the director level, making a recommendation, the city manager is better informed.
So next one, so last time we had clarifying streets and planned unit development. Everything that we said then about it being confusing and us trying to make the language clear still stands. But we also wanted, or there was also some confusion in the way this code is written about whether public, I guess whether actual dedication to the public is required in a planned or for streets in a planned unit development, or whether just public access is required. And we found that just public access is required in our code already, but we wanted to go back and firm this up now because this is just a confusing piece of code, and we thought that this would kind of finish tying that up.
The short way of saying it is we wanted to try and clarify it so that when a reasonable, or even a planner reads it, their end result isn't, wow, I don't know what that means. Because that's what happened. So I'm like, wow, okay, it's English, but what are they getting at? So what they're getting at is the difference between public use and public street design. That's not what it's saying. It's saying public use. So the private street design and criteria and when it can apply stays in the adopted standards and is not this. But if you go that route, you want people to use those private street improvements to deliver things, to visit a neighbor, to walk their dog, no gated communities. While it doesn't address gates, I'm not saying that. But the public use. And so for a PUD, it's saying you can have a private street in design, but it needs to be available to the public. You can't stop somebody and say, this is a private street, you cannot walk here, sir. And the way to do that on the plat is through easements and the languages and so forth. And so we're hoping this clarifies use and design. Just in trying to be succinct, I don't think we really achieved it, but hopefully it's better.
So the last thing was just to mention that for the clarifying the front lot line, that option 2 was preferred at the last planning commission meeting, and that's the one that we're going to advance when we draft this thing up for State Department of Commerce. And that is all that I have. We can move on to the main show.
Do you need a response from us? I don't, well, I mean, let me ask the commission, does anybody have any objections to the changes that Tyler outlined? No. Is that enough for what you need for guidance?
That is enough, and we have a checklist of what happens next. Last meeting, we mentioned the gate's not closed. If you have more, let us know. We've added a couple. Now the gate's quickly closing. What does that mean? We're going to do SEPA review on this. We're going to notice a public hearing. We're going to notify Commerce to start their 60-day review. it fast becomes too late to start adding anything. And tonight's kind of that check-in. And so it's not so much, do you agree with any of these or should we change them? It's, we're going to take this and move forward now and draft an ordinance. Once the ordinance drafted, that becomes the tool. And unless it's an emergency or something that should delay those other processes or the public hearing or council adoption, it needs to wait till next year. So that's the difference between today and tomorrow. If that makes sense, if you're okay with that. Okay, thank you.
When do you expect that we'll have a public hearing on these changes?
Well, I won't be here Monday. Our next meeting is to talk about those 5 things. So we need to do a non-project checklist, start SEPA, start that review. Based on those dates and when we can crank that out, we will send what we have, as soon as we have a draft ordinance, to Commerce and ask for expedited review. When they email us back, we'll be able to count forward the noticing requirements, and then we will know the public hearing date. So if all that work happens in September, you can anticipate October is the soonest. If we take care of it in October, maybe beginning in November, hold the public hearing, get a recommendation on the ordinance, it could be in front of the city council well, it has to be the first one in December at the latest. Second one, I guess, is traditionally canceled. And it'd be nice to be done this year and still call it a 2023 cleanup instead of a 2023 cleanup in a 2024 ordinance. So somewhere in there.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. Next item on our agenda is the comprehensive plan updates and the next step with a number of things to talk about here. Start with the penny poll. A report to you, commissioners, about where we are in that process after having 5 public events. So for the benefit of our audience members and anybody who listens to this that doesn't know the whole story of the penny poll, I want to just kind of review how this thing started. It was an idea given by our consultant, and it was an idea we adopted because we were looking for a way to spur conversation when we were going to be attending public events. We didn't start this to have a scientific poll of public opinion. We wanted to get people thinking about things so we could talk about them and hear their thoughts. And I think I point that out because when you see what we got, it looks very scientific. You know, we've got numbers, and there's a danger that we could invest more meaning in this than it really deserves. It, you know, this wasn't a random sample of people. Some people voted twice, not many, but some people who didn't live in Newcastle voted, not many. We've had probably 1,300 people vote. You know, so we're talking about handfuls of people that may not have been Newcastle residents. Children voted, so. But it was a great conversation starter and a way to engage people and I think get people thinking about the comprehensive plan and have us engage with them. So it's a penny poll because we give people who visit a booth at a public outreach event a handful of pennies, and we have a number of jars in front of them that matches the number of pennies we gave them, and we ask them, and each jar is labeled with an issue or a priority, a city priority, and we ask them to put their pennies in those jars according to how they would spend the money in that priority. So we get a rough idea of what's important to them. And we started with 8 categories that were a combination of things that were under the purview of the comprehensive plan, which is really why we did this, because we want to hear about comprehensive plan, but also included some things that weren't in the purview of the comprehensive plan, like Newcastle identity or civic engagement. Those aren't really comprehensive plan items. And at the first day when we tested the penny poll, which was at the Arts Fair at Newcastle Commons, we had a surprising number of people who said, well, public safety is a really important thing for me, and I don't see that there. And so we made the decision to add public safety to all succeeding events. So we have had 4 events since then, 4 events that have 9 pennies, 9 categories, and 1 event that has 8 pennies. The, we felt that when a citizen walks up to a city booth and is asked what they think is important, if we don't put something there that matches what they think is important, they're going to think we're out of touch and we're not listening to them. So even though we knew that public safety was not a comprehensive plan item, we felt it was important for it to be represented there so people could express what was important to them. So that's the story on the categories. So after 5 events, the rankings are, the difference. So public safety would be number 1 if we just limited to those with, where public safety was an option. But with whether or not you include public safety, the list afterwards is, the top item was a walkable downtown. The next was interconnected trails. Then came road safety and maintenance. And then there were two topics that, depending if we included all the results or just included the 4 that had public safety. The next 2 were attracting new businesses and attainable housing. Then came Newcastle identity, civic engagement, and abundant parking. So what struck me about this was that walkable downtown was at the top. That really surprised me. And that abundant parking was at the bottom, because anecdotally, we've heard people say that, that they don't think there's enough parking. And I think a lot of that has to do with the Newcastle Commons development, where people who are used to always finding a place right next to where they want to go often find those parking lots full because the restaurants are popular, the businesses are popular, and they sometimes have to park maybe a block away and walk. If you include all 5 events, the first one being where there were a lot of residents from Newcastle Commons, a lot of people who could walk from their house to the restaurants, that group, abundant parking was way, way down on the list. And a walkable downtown was much higher. So actually, the gap between the lowest and the highest was about 50%. In other words, 50% more people said walkable downtown was important than said abundant parking. But if you take all those city folks out who like to walk and live close to the restaurants, and you just take the people who are at the park, you still get a gap, only it's about a third, 33% more. So anyway, it's a persistent change. Another thing I observed is that if you look at all of these, the pennies are pretty well spread. It's not like, apart from public safety, it's not like everybody thinks one issue is important. There's a lot of people advocating for a lot of different things. So, I guess I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions about that. The results have been tabulated. Tyler put together a nice chart. Can we distribute that to the commissioners?
Actually, that was one of my questions I didn't ask before the meeting. It's so good. His Excel skills, when I first read the numbers, I didn't really have time, right, or the patience. But then a little bit of presentation in Excel really tells the story and becomes useful for Bill Grimes to use for an open house and so forth. But I wasn't sure if we had distributed it, other than we saw it and we oohed and awed and then moved on.
I have not, but I will.
So does the Excel charts and graphs and all that kind of stuff include public safety?
So when I went in to summarize the data that we've gotten, I saw that we didn't include it or didn't include that question in the art fair, but got the most responses back from the art fair. And so I actually ended up showing it two different ways. One and I put them side by side. So one version shows you everything with public safety, but not including the art fair, and the other one shows you all of the events, but not including public safety. And the reason for that is because the art fair has such high participation. If you just lump them all together, your public safety will be artificially depressed.
Yeah, I agree. It would dilute it. And the reason, as Charlie pointed out, that it got added is because we got an onslaught of people asking about it, and our answer was, we don't have a jar. We don't have a jar. We don't have a jar. And we kept apologizing for it. So, and then at the concerts in the park, we had some people, hi Allison, we had some people, wanting to very enthusiastically talk about these issues. And fortunately, the police were right there, so I kept on referring them over to talk. Here's the police, talk to the chief, he's right there, talk to the police. So I think it'd be great if, to the extent Bill Grimes, Mark, is going to be talking with the public or putting stuff together, if I go to my son's school and they want me to bring popsicles and I don't bring popsicles, they're going to say, why don't we have popsicles? If we come to a meeting to the public and public safety is an afterthought, we're going to look bad. So please, for goodness sake, don't say, oh yeah, sorry, we have a good reason for not including it. Let's figure out a way to give the people what they want. That's my 2 cents.
And it was only the first one, right? And then we pivoted right after the first event? Okay, yeah. This on your screen actually is the magical word.
Yeah, I just threw this together.
This tells the story quicker.
Can you walk us through it, Tyler? I can't understand it.
Sure. So I just threw this together after I saw that we had data because it's raw numbers. I do not like looking at raw numbers. So we'll start with the graph to the right here, topics by rate chosen. You can see in the blue is the total without the art fair. And so that allows you to fully capture the public safety question without the skew for all of the events where we asked it. And in that one, public safety does come out on top with 16% of the answers or responses, followed by a walkable downtown and interconnected trails. For the gray, you have the total without public safety. So that's using all of the events, but then striking the public safety because it can't fairly represent it when the art fair didn't ask the question. And in that one, your walkable downtown, interconnected trails, and then road safety and maintenance are your highest, with a little bit more of a discernible bump. The public safety actually makes the other topics shrink down a little bit and appear flatter. But then if you look at the table at the bottom, options popularity, not including the art fair and not including public safety, I showed essentially the same data in the graph there, or in the chart there, as a rank. And so for that one, you could see the walkable downtown and interconnected trails were in the top 3 among both of them. Public safety is number 1 whenever we ask the question. I suspect that it would have been the same at the art fair had that question been asked then. So it's set up so that we can just, as soon as we have the data for Newcastle Days, we can plug it in and everything will update right then, and that'll be that. And we can expand on this, of course, depending on any interesting patterns we want to pick at as we go on. But you can see there's actually a lot of stability here. The rate choosing Newcastle identity, for example, is really pretty constant. There's not, walkable downtown. We have, all of these are showing up within 1 or 2 points of each other, which tells me that we're getting a decent sample, or at the very least, we're getting a consistent sample.
Okay, we're going to turn to the town hall meeting, but before we do that, we have one more outreach event, Newcastle Days. And we have commissioners signed up to cover the booth from 10 a.m. when it starts to 4 p.m. And the Newcastle Days continues from 4 to 7. Some staff members are volunteered to staff the table for some times, but I want to just do a final check-in with staff and with commissioners to, and I'll pass the sheet along so you're reminded of when you've been signed up. But I'll ask the staff, are you volunteering to cover 4 to 7? Oh,
Yeah, staff are willing to come. Tyler and myself are both available. I think there's also a question as to whether or not we think 4 to 7 is necessary to be covered. Commissioners have stepped up between 10 and 4, and that's amazing coverage. So absolutely willing to come. Just want to make sure that we feel like it's necessary.
I would say if you're willing, let's have the coverage, but if it's going to be I won't say a personal hardship, but, just the more the merrier, but we don't have to have everybody there, for all day, cover every single minute, so.
Yeah. Well, I think my son will enjoy Newcastle Days, so we'll come.
Preferably between 4 and 5, right? Okay.
Hey, Charlie, will we be sharing the booth with, like the Community Activities Commission again? Or is it a separate booth? Just curious.
No, we're sharing a booth. I have an email that tells me what the arrangements are, but I'll have to.
Well, I was gonna say, because they helped out too, actually, so.
Yeah, and I think they are gonna, from what I heard from Deb Polson, is that there is gonna be a table just for us. There's gonna be a few more Newcastle tents than at the concerts in the park.
Okay. Great. Okay, I'm going to pass this around. Oh, yeah.
I have a question. Is there any change to the goal or the idea around our participation on Newcastle Days? Like, are we going to keep doing the penny poll, or is there anything changing on how we're going to, focus the time?
I'd say we can change, but I'm not proposing anything.
I think there's enough people who haven't done it yet that it's still a good activity. I guess I don't have an opinion. I just was curious what other people think.
I think every event attracts a different group of people.
Yeah, okay.
I have more to say. Should I, Maggie, I'm going to give people a chance to talk. Do you have anything to say?
No, well, I'm just wondering, in terms of any new things, will we have the schedule for town hall by then?
That'll be the very next thing we talk about, actually,
Okay.
yeah. So if your question hasn't been answered, let's come back to it after Mark
Yeah,
talks.
I'm just wondering if we have, town hall schedule, all that, we can add that in the Newcastle Day, I guess, communicate out.
I want to know what it's going to look like. I feel like we're spending 3.5 minutes on something that we should spend 3 hours on. I mean, this is Newcastle frickin' Days. Everybody's going to be there, right? This is our big chance to talk to the public. Everybody's going to be there. They're either going to be there or they're going to talk about being there, right? So I don't think we should miss this opportunity to get them to come to the booth. We did concerts in the park. And yeah, we had the penny poll, and we managed to talk some families into coming and throwing some pennies in, and the kids were really excited to be involved in it. But I just feel like we underutilized it. I really feel like we could have done more with it. And similarly, if we get through Newcastle Days and don't have a ton of communication between our commission and the public, it's going to be a lost opportunity. There's not a better opportunity the entire year than right now to plan an amazing event that gets people to come up to the booth and talk to us. We should be wearing like bright orange vests that say, "This is your chance, folks." Because after the pizza stand went away, everybody wanted to talk about it, right? You know, we got all sorts, you know, and that's why I want to know when the PSC polls went up. I don't know how anybody wouldn't know about the PSC polls, but by golly, when those construction trucks are out there, everybody wants to talk about it. So we're going to be making some huge decisions over the next couple of months that are going to frame the complexion of the city and the character of the city, you know, what the downtown's going to look like, you know, construction throughout the city. And for us not to put it right in front of everybody's face so they know that this is your chance. Like I know we're going to talk about this separately, but the whole point of that post on Facebook was to put it right in your face. Say, this is your chance. What do you think? Help us figure out these major decisions so that we build trust and communication between just our little group and everybody out there that doesn't have time to come to these meetings, doesn't have time to check Facebook posts. But by golly, they're going to be there with their kids to go get some cotton candy. And I just want to make sure we grab their attention, Charlie. So I'm just wondering, how is that going to be designed to get their attention so as they're walking by, they don't do like they did 90% of the time, which is to kind of give us a side eye and then keep walking. I'd love it if they actually saw something so that we attracted them in, you know, so the kids wanted to come and talk to us, the parents were interested. I'm not saying we say we're gonna, you know, put up a water park in the middle of the QFC parking lot to get their attention, but, you know, get something that would really say, okay, I wanna talk to these people, I wanna have some input, I feel like they really care about my opinion, it looks like this is something I should spend my time doing. Like, for example, Facebook posts. Other cities maybe spend money to promote their Facebook posts, right? They actually take money from the budget to promote these types of things. I'm not saying we have to spend extra money. I feel like this is a big event coming up here in a couple of weeks, and I'm begging you guys to not miss the opportunity to get the community to weigh in on this, because I know some people are going to check all the Facebook posts, but there's a lot of people out there that are not going to be on Facebook. So that's my 2 cents. I'm not saying we have to do it right now, but if we're going to have like a planning session, I would be happy to attend and give my 2 cents.
I want to recognize Commissioner Dantzler, but doesn't anybody from staff want to respond to Jim at this point?
I appreciate the sentiment.
I appreciate the appreciation, but what are we going to do? I mean, what's the booth going to look like? So it looks like it looked at the concerts in the park. We're going to have the same amount of response. I'm just wondering, do we want, you know, pictures? Do we want, you know, what can we do to, I don't know, who's in charge of the booth at the Newcastle days? Is it Mayor Newing? I know she's busy, but is it Scott?
We have some staffing issues this year. I'll just leave it at that. This isn't the setting for, just like Facebook, it's not a setting for staffing issues. We have a CAC member running events this year quite successfully. And so while you're absolutely support your comments, there's no problem with that. But there are surrounding circumstances that cannot be avoided. So if you have any suggestions, we could look into doing it, and I'll leave it at that.
Commissioner Dantzler?
I appreciate your comments, and I've been thinking more about Newcastle Days and how many people we're gonna see. And I've been curious about whether the penny poll, we want to do that again because, like we just mentioned, it's great data, but some of it doesn't have to do with our comprehensive plan, and that's what we're working on right now. And so if we're able to circulate information about our town hall and get people there, I think that might be a better forum for discussion too, because we have our consultant there, we have our staff there. You know, it's a more organized collection of resident opinion. Not that I would enjoy talking to people, of course, it's great, but it's, I could see us getting potentially more people at our town hall if we promoted it and talked a little bit more about what we're going to be doing there.
Yes, Commissioner Marsh.
I echo that sentiment. I think that the penny poll has been great for spurring discussion. I think it's also, personally, I have a different perspective on some of the things that have been discussed today in terms of what should be communicated. I think that, from my perspective, talking to people, a lot of people thought that they were voting for police, right, and more police presence. And I think that there is, I think your comments, I think that it created confusion and in a way it was a lost opportunity to really be able to focus people on thinking about what we're doing and talking about it, instead of trying to get people feeling like we're letting them vote for safety because that's something we know is important to them. I think we got a lot of good feedback on that. I think that's important feedback to give to city council. But I think if we're not able to get information and engage in dialogue that's around what we're trying to do here, we're missing the point. That's my view. So I'm with you. I'd like to focus on how do we now move this toward what is this type of feedback? What does the community want to do in terms of what we're trying to accomplish with a comp plan revision? You know, are we looking at changes to downtown? Let's talk about downtown. Are we talking about housing? That's my view. And if the town hall is a better place to get people focused on that, let's promote the heck out of the town hall. We can have the conversations at Newcastle Days, but let's maybe focus this more toward the comp plan now and use the penny poll as a springboard.
So I can respond to a couple of things that you've all brought up. One, the concerts in the park were not a great venue for our kind of booth because people came there to sit and watch a concert. The art fair was a great venue because people were there to walk from booth to booth, and they automatically go to a booth to check out what's in that booth, and then they decide whether to stay. But so people, at least we knew they would walk past us and we could pull them in. The Newcastle Days will be more like the art fair, as I understand it, because there's an art fair built into Newcastle Days, and we're going to be there. So there should be better traffic than we experienced with the concerts. I think we should have a handout that promotes the town hall, and so I'll commit to working with staff on getting that made. I think to Scott's point, that if we use the penny poll as a springboard to better conversations, we'd get better input, and maybe we could come up with a couple of questions, I don't know, maybe as many as 3, that when we get them, after they do the poll, we ask them, what do you think about this? Mark may address this in his comments to follow. I know that one of the pieces of work that the consultant and the staff are working on for the town hall meeting is to kind of distill some of the big questions or the issues about what we need to do with the comp plan so we can put those in front of folks. Maybe that work will be done soon enough so that we can use those questions for Newcastle Days. And if not, maybe we can just come up with our own. I mean, I think the downtown is a good one right there. We could ask people, if that downtown develops, what would you like it to look like? Maybe there's another question we can ask too that would be like that. So. Commissioner Dantzler.
Sorry, I have a lot of comments. I've had a lot of time to think on my nice vacation. I am curious to talk more, and maybe this is part of what you're going to present, like the ideas for the town hall, because I think, I'm stopping short of really pushing the promotion of the town hall because I don't really know yet what it's going to be like. But I think that if it is an information session where people are learning more about the comp plan, what's in it, what's not, that's really helpful. And then I'm interested to hear if you're also going to be, the consultant and staff will also be collecting feedback from the people who show up, or is it just a listening session? But I'm meandering a little bit, but in thinking about the things that did score high, walkable downtown, that's what I've been wondering about is what parts of the comp plan even address that? Is that something that we would want to jump into? People were telling me great ideas, but I think that's more of the downtown plan and not the comp plan. So even clarifying those sort of questions within our, the 7 of us, of what do we want to talk to residents about if it's connected to the comp plan? Sorry.
Any commissioners that haven't commented have anything you want to add before we ask Mark to give his content? Okay, let's go.
Next part. Now I'm glad I put it down. Let me test this out. All right, next item is in regards to what I'm starting to refer to as an open house. For weeks, I've been calling it a town hall. The feedback I've gotten is, why don't you start calling it an open house? So I'm going with that, to separate it from other work efforts from the council and so forth. What I tried to capture this afternoon is a short summary of what I found about venue and begin a discussion about what is going to happen that night. It mirrors the email that we sent originally checking everyone's availability. We haven't had the sit-down meeting with Bill Grimes, but that is scheduled to happen, to start developing what happens at that open house. In looking at venues, part of the feedback was, let's not have it at City Hall, let's have it off-site, have it be independent. We looked at a variety of spaces. We talked about resources and what's out there. Right now, this proposal is to have it at the library. It's not ideal, but it has some positive aspects to it. One of the items that's not ideal is the room has an occupancy of 44 people. Not ideal, because if somebody were to ask me how many people are going to show up, I don't have an answer. I've been to some where there's 3 people. I've been to some where it's more like what you experience at the City Council's Town Hall at the golf course. So I won't have an answer for that. The other option is Aegis. Has some other problems, but has a higher capacity. And so what I originally wanted to do tonight is put this in front of you and say, this is what we found. Are you comfortable with this? And then I would go set the mechanics of it and then schedule meetings with Bill and develop the program and the flyer and so forth of what actually happens. But from what I've heard tonight, we need to talk about some of the details. The problem with Aegis is there's no parking. We go there for the chamber luncheons. It is available. We go over there to chamber luncheons, and there's not many of us. If we expect a big crowd, they'll have nowhere to park. The library doesn't have that problem, but it's got an overall capacity problem. My second worry about the library was, would we interfere with what a library is? They've assured us that it's compatible. It's isolated enough, and it's available. So there, yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think that the Y has some public spaces, and I think like there's an upstairs space. I don't know what the capacity is, but do we know, is that a candidate?
We do,
Would
I've
it be
observed
bigger?
it, and when we met with the director, it's smaller.
It's smaller,
isolated,
okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
And it's full of equipment and desks and stuff.
Does it have to be a sit-down type event? The reason I'm asking is if there was a gymnasium, hypothetically speaking, if there was a gymnasium right next to QFC called Pacific Courts that was free and available.
In theory, but what I've also found in the short time I've been here, we have no equipment. Just a simple conversation about, do we have 2 tents for Newcastle Days took a month. We don't have easels. SCJ doesn't have a source. The easy answer is, we'll go get it. It's not as easy as it sounds. So our ideal is to find a venue where we can work within the mechanics and that it's free and it solves all these problems and it's not City Hall. That's what we've been trying. And now with a month to go, I think we have a date and a time. I think we have a general structure, and now I very fast have to move to securing a venue. The importance of the library is they only reserve a month in advance. That's next Monday. Right now, nobody has a reserve. Aegis is available, but you have to sign a catering contract, and you can't bring in your own food. It's relatively cheap. It's $350 to reserve the room. I don't see a capacity problem there, but none of the other logistics seem to work there.
Sorry, another idea. Do either of the elementary schools have
That is a
either
possibility.
Riston or Newcastle?
Going into tonight, this was our suggestion. If this doesn't work for you, tomorrow's another day. I can go anywhere else you suggest. We don't have a lot of funds, but tomorrow I can go investigate other options. If you think that 44 or more people are going to show up, I suggest we do that. If you think that we're not going to get 44 or they're not all coming at once, then the library is our best option.
that you can easily reserve, and they got all the tables and chairs you need, Mark, at both Hazelwood and Risden. And I don't know about Newcastle Elementary, but I've been to many events at both, and it's easy. It might be free, I would think.
Hey, our HOA tried to do something at Newcastle Elementary, and it was free, it was reservable, but they wanted us to have insurance that would cover the school in case something happened, and that was where it got hung up. So I don't know if that's.
I reserved the Risden Middle School, and I just did it through the Newcastle baseball group for the event we're gonna have. So
Yeah.
that might cover it. We just need to find an organization to run it through.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll have a lot more room, and there's available parking too.
So I'm open. This is what we have to offer. This could work. I'm open to any criticism or any other options. But the more specific, the better.
I think it's worth exploring the larger venue. And if we can't get the larger venue, or it doesn't work for some other logistical reasons, to nail down the library.
We were at a meeting with a school rep, I just can't recall, 4 months ago maybe. And I don't recall who it was, but they did offer, maybe it was when we were talking about soccer fields or baseball or going to outreach. And if I could go back to that moment and find that person, that would really help. I just can't recall when that was. But with the one thing we clarified in that conversation is that the school facilities are available for public use. We didn't look into the details, and the city certainly has insurance. Not sure the logistics about, getting a specific policy for an event, an additional insured and so forth, or board approval, but. Okay.
If we don't have anything nailed down by Monday, I'd reserve the library regardless. We could cancel the reservation a few days later if we have to wait that long to get confirmation of another facility.
Okay, if we can move on to the program itself, that would help inform those logistical questions. My hope is that we get a lot of people to attend. Hasn't been my experience, but that is my hope. So as we develop the program, we have something for them, and we do the outreach, we'll have a better understanding of what we need. So originally, when we talked with Bill and we came up with the availability question, we posed 4 bullet points of what it could be. The format would be 2 things. 1, information and feedback. We talked about weekday or weekend, day or evening. There is no good solution. So the program that we have envisioned would be about 3 hours because Aegis closes at 8 sharp, because the library closes at 8 sharp. And if we could find a venue that was 5 to 9-ish and allowed some cleanup time, and they had equipment and parking, and we got a crowd of 100, that would be perfect. The program would then be 2 cycles or phases. Same presentation twice for early arrivers and late arrivers. You don't have to be there at 5, you don't have to be there at 6:30. Show up when you can. That's the only way to address the participation and attendance. If we do 1 run through, everyone is going to arrive at different times. If you go that style, then we need a more formal presentation and a more formal program that runs from start to finish, and that would be the feedback we give to Bill. His suggestion then, and probably next week, is going to be those 2 informational presentations. What is a comp plan? What are we doing? But not so specific that it weighs everybody down. The feedback and the conversations, the standing at a map, the standing at a chart, looking at a street, looking at a park, looking at a mine or critical area or downtown, or having the downtown plan in your hand, having that conversation and writing any feedback on charts, pinning it on the wall, those opportunities are what the program should be about. He has suggestions. We'll have that meeting with him. We have some flexibility. but we are limited to a certain amount of hours and a certain amount of resources. But add, this is not the only opportunity. One of the hard parts is we don't have a physical document. We have the existing comp plan, we have existing maps and exhibits and blank poster board paper that we could write on. There is no draft document to say, hey, what do you think? What do you think about this? So that feedback's going to be very general, and this is the only opportunity in September. It doesn't mean we can't have a second one. The process will continue. You'll have those opportunities in public participation and feedback throughout the whole process. It gets very formal next spring when you have a draft document, when you're through the problem statements, you have the actual amendments. There's a better understanding of what's in the policies right now, what's covered and what's not. That's what he's referring to as a problem statement. You won't have that until after the open house. This open house begins to bridge the gap between the existing vision that's being tested and the creation of that problem statement. The way he has it worded on these bullet points doesn't preclude feedback at that open house, but it starts that conversation because it's based on the items in the penny poll, and that's why that exhibit is so helpful. But it achieves two things. It doesn't tell you what we want to hear. We don't march in and say, please tell us this. But at the same time, it's so general, they can tell us whatever they want. There's no other way to describe that other than to go do it.
What is the problem statement? Is that drafted?
The problem statement is a summary way of saying what needs to be amended in the code. There's three main elements, two of which we know. The first one is PSRC's pre-checklist, Vision 2050 and the regional plans. Second one is commerce and the legislative changes that mandate you shall have these policies for this element, that element. The third unknown is the purpose of the penny poll and why you're going to the concerts, why you're going to Newcastle Days, and why you're holding the open house. Is what does the community want changed? What it's not is a clean slate saying we need a comp plan. What should we put in it? You have one. People have a year to understand that. This isn't the only opportunity to test what's in there and find out what needs to be changed. That problem statement is the product that we use for the environmental review, the alternatives, and then the actual amendments that create that, here is the draft document that we're going to take to public hearings and have another open house and eventually give to the city council. Unfortunately, it's in 2024, not September at this open house.
So at the open house, part of the message is the things that those first two parts that we have to change because we have to bring the comp plan into compliance with the law. The third part still is a big question. What are we going to ask them in order to get the answer back that will be helpful? And from what I'm hearing, the only thing we have to guide us there is the penny pool, where we won't be getting anything. There isn't another source of data that would inform us. So we have to make a decision basically about what we're going to ask so that we get back feedback that is useful.
Well, it's a singular opportunity. It's 3 or 4 hours to elicit feedback. The penny pool is not the only source. It's the only source we're talking about right now. All the sources started when we first started this effort. You build a website, you have an opportunity for somebody to send email. You never really see a lot of emails until you have the draft document and there's something concrete. I anticipate a lot of email and a lot of comment next year during those steps. But examples of what feedback is going into those problem statements and is being captured for potential amendments. The penny poll items are just part of it. If you remember back to February and March, we had individual one-on-one interviews with Bill. What's the word? Not independent. Not secretive. What's the word? Confidential. One-on-one. Come on in. We're not going to tell you what we're going to do. You represent a key stakeholder, a key part of this community with a unique perspective, come on in, meet with Bill before the process even starts, and give your perspective. If it's trails, pour on the trails. He's collected that feedback. That goes into that community element of the problem statement, then gets drafted into suggested items that need to be amended. Then the language gets drafted. Then you have that concrete element. What we don't get is a lot of emails saying, I hate policy A, so I'm suggesting policy C, and it's August 2023. You don't get that till the end until, unfortunately, you're making a recommendation at city council. That's exactly what we need right now. So these opportunities are to elicit that. This open house would be a good opportunity for you to hear it directly. That way, if you're having those conversations, whether we get it in writing or captured, then we have meeting after meeting after meeting with Bill. The problem statement and the amendments are created, and it evolves into a draft document. So the spectrum to describe that is you have a comp plan with extensive policy in it right now. There's a vision, a mission, goals, and policy. It exists. It's a body of work done for a long period of time that captures the community. The first effort is you test the vision. Then you create the problem statement, what needs to be changed. Then you make suggestions. Once we're at that stage of suggestion, it's easier to get feedback. It's easier to focus on the elements of what to talk about. Right now, it's easier to focus on just feedback and building relationships and gathering it. So we can create this open house that's comp plan specific.
Commissioner Marsh?
So I have a couple of thoughts, and I think it starts with something, Charlie said when we first embarked on this exercise, which I think it was something along the lines of, this is from 10 years ago, and I think part of what we need to be understanding is have the views of kind of the major policy components of this within our community. Have they changed? Are we seeing shifts? And I guess that has me thinking, is it appropriate to maybe start introducing questions like, there's House Bill, I guess it's not House Bill anymore, it's whatever came of House Bill 1110 that passed, right? So there are middle housing requirements in the state that may or may not apply to some degree to us here in Newcastle, but I think that allows an opportunity to have a discussion about housing that could be addressed in here. So could you have one discussion be around where is it appropriate to have workforce housing? How do you feel about that as a citizen that lives here? Where could you envision this? How do you feel about middle housing as infill housing? So it seems to me that there's a discussion there that we're starting to narrow. It gets more granular. Another one that we could have could be something along the lines of, we have, correct me if I'm wrong, we have one bus route through the city of Newcastle, or is it two? So yeah. So as we're looking to grow, is public transit, if there were more opportunity to work with other municipal entities, work with, Metro to try and get more bus routes here, what would that look like? Is that something that should be an objective in the document for the next 10 years? We own, as a city, a bunch of public land, right? And we're talking about development, and maybe the downtown plan is more, what's your vision of downtown? But should we be thinking about public-owned lands, and do we do different things? Could we be doing public-private partnership? Because, there's only so much you can do with zoning. You're not investing money in properties and development through zoning. All you're doing is you're creating a canvas that allows for that. So are there things like public-private partnerships for development that you'd be interested in seeing in Newcastle? So are those two granular discussion points for this type of a town hall?
Not at all. They mirror the 9 things in the penny poll. They're specific in the sense that if you ask a question on September 26th, what do you think about House Bill 1110? I won't guess. Often they're not going to know what it is. You know what I mean? And so it's a learning curve. You need to get there. But the issue is very important. And how you elicit that feedback that night is very important. That's why we have Bill Grimes. That's why we have a consultant that does this for a living, to elicit that feedback in your presence and have exercises and topics that make those 3 or 4 hours of contact with the public productive. But it will not be detailed. It's not a survey. It's not, do you agree with 1110? And if so, where should the triplex go? Your neighborhood or your neighbors? It's not that specific. It gets there because as you look at the future land use map next year, the zoning map next year, and potentially adopt those changes, it has that effect.
And I guess that's my point, is how do we have that conversation so we're somewhere between how do you feel about affordable housing and pennies in a jar, which I think has been really important to help us understand how our community feels, and how do you, this is what House Bill 1110 is. Let me take 20 minutes and explain it to you, right? I mean, is Bill going to, I'm not sure what this format is going to be, but, Jim is our housing person. Is Jim going to be armed with, 2 sentences, 3 sentences to introduce the subject to a group of people who want to come up and talk about housing, right? And they're going to be able to talk to Jim, and Jim's going to be able to say, you know what, the state has started to look at and impose at the state level, infill housing. And what that means is not just single-family detached homes where you have single-family neighborhoods, right? So how do we feel about that as a community? How do you feel about that? Is there a place for that? What do you think that is? And, if that's Jim's element, is Jim going to be talking about that with people that night? Is that something, is there a way that we can equip, if that is Jim? I'm not volunteering, by the way, my friend, but if it is Jim, how do we get him ready for that?
And that was my question, because, Charlie said read the section, so I read the damn section twice. I'd like to talk about it with somebody, right? Like, I think we should have a conversation, like, I know the housing element inside and out. I don't know the other elements all that well, because it took all my time to read that. Can we have that conversation before we talk to anybody outside this room? So, we're a little more prepped for I have some questions.
As a commission, we're actually not limited to just this meeting and the open house and your next regular meeting. If you'd like to investigate workshops, roundtables to better prepare like that or communicate, we can explore that. Instead of trying to cram it into a 3 or 4 hour, here's your coffee, let's get it all done tonight thing. I'll bring that up in our...
Commissioner Dantzler?
I have a lot of thoughts floating, but I'm trying to make them concise. I think we do have an interesting event coming up in that, I'm picturing the people that I talked to, and I said, come to this, other meeting we're having. They went really granular, really fast. Like when I said, well, what do you think about when you say your priority is walkable downtown? What do you mean? Oh, they, had a road, they had a store, they have it. And same thing, I think when you talk to somebody about trails or roads, they have something to say. And what I'm hearing is that this probably won't be the granular night, this open house in September, that maybe that will come later. Like, I think what I'm trying to say is I think people might come and be surprised. They're like, oh, this is a lot more complex. There's a law we have to follow in Newcastle about housing. Like, this isn't just about what store I might want to go to, or, not that those things are important. That's a very cool conversation to have, and I'm looking forward to those, but I'm just wondering, what, are we going to get that granular?
I envision it being everything in between, what is needed. You're going to get Jessica Smith coming in and going, I've never heard of this. What is a comp plan? Come on over. I'll talk to you, right? You're going to get some other resident that's maybe been on council or done it 16 times and knows the RCW and has a specific bit of feedback. We're going to collect that and everything in between. But the program has to be built for the middle person or the common ground, have some sort of organization. So if we can develop the organization, we have tools there to capture or to assist with the other variety.
And is the plan for Bill to facilitate pretty much the whole thing? It's not really a commissioner time to do, or?
I think he would leave that open. If he were here and we're starting that conversation, he may say, should we talk at all? Should you talk and maximize the feedback and the one-on-one and stand there at an easel and say, what do you think about this? Or have you thought about House Bill? Oh, you don't know about House Bill. Or you know about House Bill. What do you think about duplexes and single family? I don't know that will get the purpose beyond just awareness of what we're doing, right? We're doing a comp plan update that's due December next year. You should participate. We will achieve that. So there has to be some element of him presenting and producing something, and he's willing to do that. These are his bare bones of what he can get usefulness out of this meeting without talking too much and leaving 2 large periods as much as possible for the individual conversations. If you want to, I would suggest if you want to maximize those individual conversations within a program, we can work with him or instruct him to do a procedural or informational type presentation of resources and where you can go and what's this about, and keep it as summary as best, without being too
Wait,
brief,
c-
but then have stations for your individual elements.
Sorry, Jim, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm feeling a little frustrated about I don't really understand what's going to happen at the open house. It's, on one hand, I feel like there's a plan that our consultant is providing for us, but that it's wide open, and you're asking us for some input, but I can't respond to something that is, at least my level of understanding is so vague. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know what he's going to ask enough to give you any response. And I don't know what my responsibility is as a commissioner here. Are you asking, you're not asking us to give you feedback on a proposal. I feel like you've given us the barest outline of what might happen there, but I can't picture it. So
Okay. Well, let's step back. Tonight's purpose was to select a date. The hope was that all of you would be present and staff would be present. We had a date, a time, and a venue set up. Then next we would meet and develop what the program is. We have an idea of what that program is and what we need to get out of it. But there's flexibility on what you need to get out of it and how to participate. That hasn't happened yet. We could start that tomorrow. Tonight's purpose was to get a room at a time, at a night, and set that in motion. So, and it informs both, right? The capacity issue, the so forth. So the feedback we're getting is that we need to achieve that. We need to provide that. And then give you an option. We don't have another planning commission meeting between now and then. He's going to, if indeed the 26th is that night, he will be here. The planning commission meeting is the next night, Wednesday. He will be out of town.
Excuse me, so we will still have a planning commission meeting on the 27th?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not just for comp plan and continuation, which we will absolutely need, but for small wireless and minutes and
All right.
housekeeping ordinance.
Is it just my 2 cents? I personally like, this all seems very vague to me too. And I kind of like being prepared for things. So I think we will need some workshops or something. If we're not having another planning commission meeting. I think we really need some place to figure out what we're doing.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yeah, I also, I guess I'm not very clear what will happen either. And I also want to know what exactly we want to achieve, because one thing I was thinking is that capacity actually, if that town hall is trying to get feedback, input, 44 people is really not going to achieve that, right? It's too little, right? I mean, it's for a 13,000 population, right? And we are, I mean, adults are half of that, but 44 is too little. I mean, if that town hall is to get people's feedback, that venue, I don't think it's going to work.
That's the importance between not calling it a town hall and calling it an open house. It's interactive. The town hall format you've seen, that's like the city council. Preparation, PowerPoint, here are the issues, this is what we're gonna talk about. This is not that. This is more of a free-for-all, hearing what the community has to say and building that relationship.
So it's, that's why I think the format probably will work, which really is like 2 sessions, people can come and go, right? They don't really stay.
That's our suggestion, because everyone is, it's not so structured that it's like the city council town hall. We're gonna start at 5:30. You can have a drink and an hors d'oeuvre, and then at 6:30, we're gonna start a presentation. Here's the agenda, here's the 3 items, and then we're open for questions. It's not that. It's absolutely not that. And the reason is, if that's appropriate, then we should hold that type of event next spring when we have something to actually show, something to actually discuss and debate. We can do that. This. At some point, you're going to have what I refer to as a draft 2035 comprehensive plan, and that's where it really starts to get interesting and is a little bit more clear.
Commissioner Dantzler,
As the
then
amendment.
Vice Chair Gennard, and then,
I'll take ticket 4.
yes, and then Commissioner Quigg.
Hang in there.
I'd like to propose that we keep the September 26th date. We've already done so much reaching out to the community, and we have a really big day coming up on Newcastle Days where we could promote and get people to attend. What if we considered moving up our next Planning Commission meeting date a week so that we could meet one more time the week before the 26th, so we could have a clearer sense about the agenda that's been developed and if we have a role or if not?
I'm getting back from Ireland on September 26th, so I'm really excited about walking punch drunk into a meeting and standing there and trying a lot to look cross-eyed. But one of the thoughts that occurred to me is that our consultant could introduce the topic, explain the timeline, explain kind of generally the feedback we're going to be looking for. And then maybe each of us could stand by an easel with a flip thing and a marker and start just writing people's comments down in the most succinct fashion so that we can then record all that. And each of us with our own topic. And people can walk around and, address the topics that interest them and give us some feedback.
I was imagining speed dating. Speed dating / if you're into Disneyland where you meet the princesses. I was literally thinking that's perfect, Brian. I mean, like there almost should be like, each of us should be there with like an assistant or an intern or a kid that can write. And we have conversations with people in each family, each group can come around and they can talk to the guy that wants to know about land use. They can talk to the transportation guy, the housing guy. And we should be recording all of this constantly, right? But it shouldn't be a microphone with somebody speaking. Like Brian said, we should have different sections where people can go up to different sections. Hey, I want to learn about this or I have ideas about that. I love Brian's idea. Thank you.
Commissioner Marsh?
And I think if you have a flip chart that you actually write it down, they see that you've taken down their comment. And when the next person shows up and sees they've already talked about that, maybe they'll move on.
And along these lines, I'm going to request props, right? So like trail map from a friend here, right? I would love a zoning map for the land use stuff.
Well, it's like a science fair. We should have a little display behind us.
Well, he was talking about speed dating. I was thinking
Princess, whatever you want to call it.
you go station to station in the elementary school gym and you're like checking out all the science experiments. I mean, But that's not to the exclusion of having Bill Grimes stand up and give an overview, introduce issues, explain why we're standing there asking for this input and helping focus.
If you like that balance, we'd have that conversation with him, and I think that fits into what he's looking for. He doesn't want to talk at a crowd for 3 hours. That's not what he's asking for. But he wants to kick it off. What are we doing? And have organization, and we can achieve that. And then if you want to do the 7-element speed dating thing, and you see that as maximizing your interaction and feedback, and you capture what you think is important, even if it's at the level of, we should look into that issue and not get granular about which wording and what we should have in a document in February. We can achieve that. And if we get a venue that's open past 8, we could have 4 hours for that.
Would the presentation part, Bill's presentation part, would it set the stage for those discussions by bringing in the data that he collected from his interviews, as well as, you know, the penny poll stuff? But will he help set the stage for that?
That is more, I mean, yes, absolutely. But will he be ready with a problem statement and all the other comp plan and travel that he's doing? That I don't know. To some extent, absolutely yes. But it won't be a document or presentation of the problem statement. It won't be a summary of everything he heard. He has it in his brain, and he's producing that. It may not be ready for public consumption or to inform you by September 26th.
The one, I really like the ideas that have been put forth about the 7 stations, but I think the one thing we need to make that work is somehow get people to understand what those stations mean. What is it that we need to hear from them that would be useful? And that's the challenge. I don't know, and maybe we'll just leave that to our own devices. You know, you'll have read your elements, and maybe you ask them some questions. I don't know. Commissioner
Yeah,
Dantzler.
I like where this is going a lot. I think we will want to rely on the consultant to, at the beginning, you know, maybe say the bad news of what the comp plan doesn't include, like this public safety topics, or just explain a little bit more about, if you are concerned about public safety, here's how the city addresses them. If it's true that it's not in the comp plan, or, you know, that's just one example, but the other topics that are in the penny poll that we're not going to go into, can somebody review why we're not?
Yes. So what are you going to write on the paper, and what are you going to take home? It's going to be a summarized version of what you've heard or what you've investigated, or capture those things to add to the list that create what we call the community feedback, that third pillar. So if we put and facilitate the stations and the tools and the time and the venue in place to achieve that, you guys have had admirable, great participation in the penny poll and the concerts. And I have every faith that you can have those conversations in that setting and it'd be very productive for you and the public. Way beyond just informing the public, hey, we're doing an update, this is what we're doing, you know, and hearing birds chirp. So I think we can do that. We won't have a lot of time for back and forth and to make it, but we do have some time and facilitation to make it clear with Charlie and Bill and make that happen. And then add the opportunity that if we get in that setting that's both organized and flexible, but gives you those stations in that time, that you could ask questions too, or ask Bill to clarify certain aspects that may help you and or the people you're standing with, and really start to get at what comes next or what you may need next before the open house is over. And then start immediately talking about how many of these you want. Because it's becoming apparent from this conversation, you're going to need more than one.
Commissioner Marsh.
I think there's one other aspect of this I'd like to see, which is the opportunity to provide online input for citizens in Newcastle. We should be hammering people with that here, right? So to the extent that there's some place you can go online, You can give your feedback. I mean, we should have cards, like we have had at the penny poll table. I think, let's get Jim in a T-shirt that has like a QR code. People can come up and scan them, and they can give their feedback right there. I mean, I'm only kind of half kidding, because people, something like that, it's kind of novel and different. Whatever we can do to, like, at every turn, give people an opportunity to hear about other places that they can give their feedback if they don't want to stand there and talk in front of a group of their neighbors. I think that we don't want to miss this opportunity to put that in front of people like 15 times per capita there.
Aaron?
Yeah, I just, this is awesome conversation, and it's actually reminded me of some things that I'm not saying you have to do, but just some ideas from outreach I've done in the past. Don't forget, we did the dot voting charrette here. That's something, those kinds of exercises where people can walk up to something and do their own. We might see that with Bill, their own kind of feedback. I worked on one project where we were working on a corridor, and so just imagine we wanted to do a new vision on Coal Creek Parkway, and people come up and they put Post-its up, right? They put Post-its up there and they point to, like, this is important to me, or I hate this, or so those kinds of interactive graphics are things we might also see with Bill. And I'm thinking, if you have flip charts and whatnot, you might want to have some conversation, the types of questions you can ask people from staff, if I'm not mistaken, prepared. So anyway, I just wanted to add those additional things as we're getting closer to the date, just to kind of consider.
I think it'd be very helpful to meet with Bill at least a week before the open house and have us all go over what's the game plan, let's refine what we're going to do so we're all on the same page, we're all prepared. I imagine that would be a noticed meeting, because there's
Yeah, the only
everybody
constraint of a
but
special meeting is
Brian
the
will be there
noticing.
because he's going to be
That's it.
sampling the Irish ale or the Irish whiskey.
If you prefer, we can develop the program starting immediately and then use that tool as a way of sharing and fine tuning before we actually do it. Two parts. But I would not wait for that meeting to discuss with Bill, what are we going to do?
No, I'm
I think with the chair and staff and Bill, we need to create that right now. Then as that evolves, test it with what we'll call a special meeting or an opportunity, so that you guys are aware of it and comfortable with it before it actually happens, before you walk in there that night.
Commissioners, what do you think about that?
I think it would be appropriate to get the game plan together. Also had another thought, if you're doing a kind of a flip chart on an easel, that maybe you have Post-its and people fill out their comment and stick that on, rather than taking the time to write each one down, have them, here's a Post-it, please write down what you've just said and stick it up there. Just thinking logistically, that might be a little easier.
I just pulled up a picture, I just showed Amy a picture. I was volunteered to be the fundraiser for Risden Middle School last year. We made a boatload of money because I stuck a bunch of QR codes, a bunch of kids, and I'm walking in front of the parents, waiting in line to drop off or pick up their kids. We didn't have a choice. You're just sitting there looking at your phone, so they would scan the QR code, and we made buckets of cash that way. I would tap it just like what Scott's idea, or whose idea was it, to use Risden for the school. You could use Risden for the form, but also use these kids and have them walk around with these codes with Aaron's survey. I mean, really, I think this is fantastic. This conversation has been inspiring. So, Mark, thank you for your patience with us, particularly me. And Allison, thank you for your patience with this meeting. We can't wait to hear whatever it is you have to say.
I can order stickers, so, yes.
Are we ready to move on to the next part of the comp plan discussion? Mark, do you have a?
We are, it's great feedback, and it actually makes it much more urgent as to what we start doing tomorrow morning. But if we can achieve one thing tonight, is Tuesday, September 26th at 5 PM, the start of what we can start building this program on. It affects Bill's travel, it affects everything. If we could at least set that, then look at venue, look at whether we have till 8 o'clock or 9, what's the price, what's the so forth, we can get there. But if we can just agree, we will be doing something called an open house the evening of the 26th. That's a great start.
I think we're all agreed to that.
Thank you very much.
So let me just recap what I think is going to happen next. Based on the 26th date, you're going to explore some larger venues. And we're going to nail down the library. If we can't nail down something before the library the sign-up window opens, you and I are going to meet, and Aaron to talk, and perhaps with Bill to talk more about this program. But as we develop that, we're going to then bring the commission back together a week before, at least a week before the town hall, to run this by them, fine tune it, and make sure we're all on the same page. Is that what you understand? And the commission? Yeah, okay. So there's a public meeting notice, all that has to be done, and should we look at calendars now to see when we might be able to, most of us could attend that meeting the week before the 26th?
Tuesday 19th, I think, is the city council meeting. Okay. Gladly.
Or perhaps we could look at Wednesday, the 20th? Oh, no, you can't do, you just said you couldn't do Wednesday.
I'm coaching soccer Mondays and Wednesdays, but do it.
What time is practice?
Practice at 5, so I'll be ready by 6:30. Can we do it at 6?
I'll make myself available any date, time that week, so that we can achieve it, and then I hate doodle polls, I'm not good at them, but we'll get at a date and a time, and we'll make this place, turn on the lights and make it happen.
Do we want to pick a date right now, maybe the 18th, 19th, or 20th?
How about
21st?
could you, in your speaker, please?
Yeah, I'm not available on the 20th, September 20th, but any other date is
So how about the 21st?
it works for me, yeah.
I'll go for the 21st, or the 18th, or the 19th, or the 20th. Anytime, or anytime after 6.
I'm in.
So how about the 21st at 7 o'clock? Or, I mean, it doesn't have to be at the same time as the regular meetings. Is that later better?
Why are we starting at 7? Why don't we start at 6:30?
6:30? Is that,
6:30 on the 21st, Thursday?
Five, 6, 6:37, whatever.
okay, it looks like 6:30 on the 21st would work. Okay. Anything else, Director Hoffman, on your part? Okay, so on the comp plan elements. So let me put a question to Director Hoffman. I have a recollection from our earlier conversation that there was going to be some material that was going to be emailed to the commissioners sometime in the next couple of weeks and that we were to review and provide email comments. Does that ring a bell? Am I just?
I mean, yes and no. Specific to the individual elements in the review, if that's it, then it's the purpose of this item. How can we facilitate an individual council member with an individual element to not only just read it, but to understand it and have the available resources to talk about it. And then get them that basis.
So did that involve, I guess what I'm wondering, it was, there is no plan to put together some body of data that concerning the comp plan that we need to get out to commissioners and have them review it and get back to you, other than what you just said?
Only if it's needed, beyond just, do you have the element and the resources you need, and how can we get it to you? That's the start.
Okay,
And as
so
you dive in, you'll discover that it contains a lot of references, a lot of items adopted by reference, contains items that are barely referenced but are very important, like Vision 2050, or the Regional Transportation Plan, or the Regional Economic Plan. So as you dive into that and you see key words, it's going to take you, it's like it's like a tree. Reading is just the first part. And don't bother to memorize it, because that's impossible. And it's not very exciting. But it's very important, because those words in a particular goal or policy are directly applied to implementation. The second part of this is to update our development codes. That's our big binder. But it's also PSRC's Vision 2050. All the plans that are adopted in there, everything that puts concrete on the ground or a bus on the road is tied to these policies and how our portion for our city influences those. So as you read that, let's say it's transportation, and you have a question on the regional transportation plan. What is the most recent? Where can I get that? We have the ability to get that for you, verify, know what it is, and help you then better inform. Much broader than just reading what's in the element. The element is supposed to be, and what our current elements are, very succinct. There's not a whole lot of narrative in there. There's a series of goals and a series of policies and a very little introduction. And that's intended so that it's clear and not too wordy. But everything that comes next is also available to read.
So Mark offered to you, through me, to tell you that if you think a conversation with a staff member would help it, if you want to get into more detail, if you want to understand something, that staff member could be from the planning group, but it could be somebody from outside the planning group, Public Works, for example, or finance, I don't know. But that's a resource that's available to you. So just keep that in mind as you review your element or read it for the third time.
Well, and during the meeting, I like the idea of getting together beforehand. Are we going to kind of section off so we can each kind of have, talk to this element like individually? Because we each have an element, right, Charlie? I mean, for the purposes of the agenda in the next meeting, can we each kind of like say, okay, we're going to talk about trails with Brian for 5 minutes. We're going to talk about transportation with whomever for 5 minutes, just so we don't have the kind of, because I'm the quick one on the trigger, I can talk the most. It should be, I feel like we should the agenda should drive the conversation. Does that make sense to you? I really, in terms of an agenda for our next meeting on the 21st, I think it was, I feel like we should each, like Paul should have 5 minutes, Maggie should have 5 minutes, Jim, No, just to kind of cover our area before we get in front of the public. So, we can kind of talk to each other and say, okay, if I was a regular citizen talking to you about trails, I would ask this question, or, we can kind of help each other out before we get in front of the citizens. I'm not saying we each take 20 minutes, but we should each get at least 4 or 5 minutes to say, okay, here's my understanding, here's my overall summary of this element within the comprehensive plan. What do you think? Oh, have you thought about this issue? They're probably going to ask about that. I would just like to prep each other a little bit and have us each have a section of the agenda. That's I would appreciate it.
Commissioners, how does that sound to you?
You're talking about our next meeting with the 7
Yeah.
months. Yeah, yes.
Okay.
How many times?
On the 21st, the meeting on the 21st.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We kind of help each other get ready.
And we'll have an agenda, because we have to publish one and notice it. We can do 2 things. One, open house prep, and then also we'll call it individual element discussions with planning commissioners.
Thank you.
Then it's on an agenda, and then it's legislative, so it's a free-for-all after that. So we can do that. Thank you.
Just to add to Chair Gatzik's point, though, if you do have questions for staff members, like our Parks and Trails planner, for example, or our Public Works Director for CFP, let us know, and we can somehow get you in touch, too.
And who should they let know?
You can let me know. Yep. Me and Mark. Mark and me.
The CC works perfectly, so between,
Yeah, city rules say that when we email a staff member, we should copy the director. If we email the director, we should copy the city manager. So,
I will then
General.
amend my email to Dabby and copy you on it. I asked for just to get together.
A protocol that is in the city procedures is that when you email a staff member, you should copy that staff member's director. So if you're emailing a director, then they should copy the city manager because that's his or her boss.
for sure at the city manager level, like if you're a elected city council person and you're asking some of staff, the CC to the city manager is minimal. It has to happen. As we're working on items, I'm just the director, I'm not city manager, and I'm more interested in getting work done. So nothing done in secrecy, but the opportunity for CCing and emailing all of us is we work remote some days, we work together, and we all achieve that. So if it's a particular day and it's easier for one of us to do it, it's helpful to be CC'd. If you need something from an individual staff member, go get it. If it's policy or resources, then yeah, then adhere to that rule.
Okay, I think we're ready to move off of the comp plan.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Yes.
Back to Newcastle Days. Are we allowed to create things for the event individually? Meaning, can I use my own money to say, acquire some sandwich signs and have the QR code and put one in the beer garden and one on the side of the stage, that kind of thing? Is that even allowed, or does the city have to do that? Because we're handing out the QR codes on the postcard. Can I put it elsewhere in the park? Can I
What?
put it on a T-shirt?
We can talk about it.
Yeah, also, we can still talk to the city maintenance manager and see what we do have available and what we could put up, and we could talk to Deb. I mean, if you have ideas, throw them our way and let us see if we can help make it happen.
Yeah. What if you don't have the means? Can I use my own money?
I'm not the expert on that question, but I don't see why anybody in the city would object to saving the city money by ponying up yourself.
All right, we'll talk, because I think we should get that QR code in the beer garden on the side of the stage. We should get that.
It goes where? Where does it go?
Well, you know those sandwich board signs you put up?
But where does the QR code go to?
Oh, it goes to the city's website.
Oh, the comp plan site.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just got ideas. We gotta.
That example is a perfect example. That is providing information to an existing tool that is staffed and available and doesn't bring in a lot of other questions. It's not branding, it's not an individual program, it's not a planning commissioner acting without consensus of the commission or outside of a work plan or outside the city council's directives. It's providing an element of your post. It's providing access to existing information that's been discussed and vetted and agreed to. So I have no problem with that element. The personal resources issue is fine to a certain extent. Probably the same guidelines. As soon as it crosses into an individual project or policy or procedure or event of an individual planning commission, it's probably best to be talked about here first and then see if it fits within all the other constraints. But if it's Post-it notes and you want to buy them and bring them, there's nothing I'm aware of that prevents that.
I think Newcastle Days is a great opportunity.
Yeah,
Maybe like 30 to 40 booths there, I think.
Cool. Oh, could we also set a goal for determining the location of our meeting on the 26th before Newcastle Days so that we can, you know, since we're going to be talking to so many people, we can tell them where to go? And we can maybe even print it somewhere?
I think that's going to be locked down well before that.
I was hoping for tonight. I need to reserve something. But, so I need to check with the schools to see if that's an opportunity, because then we can cancel out that, the attendance issue. So I'll get on that. I don't know that tonight we can make that decision, but we will have the library as the backup. And that doesn't.
In
need
time
to
for
wait.
us to prepare a handout
Yeah.
that we can, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the first part of the outreach absolutely is, hey, there's this thing at this time and this is where it goes. And then some sort of fancy graphics that gets them there. Developing the program needs to be stated on that, but the nuts and bolts can happen after.
Okay. No further comments? Yes, Commissioner Lowe.
Just have a quick question. I just noticed the maximum occupancy here is 90. Is there any reason we cannot use this room?
This room fulfills everything that we've talked about, but it's not a neutral site. So if the feedback prior about having a neutral site, the safe zone to comment, is not your top 10 concern, this fulfills parking, occupancy, awareness, it's available. We started off down the road investigating only off-site opportunities.
This room is also really hard to maneuver around, so if people are gonna be moving around and we need to post things, it's actually a little difficult for that too.
A larger room would be nicer.
How about we agree to that? We'll reserve the library Monday, the first chance we can. This is always an opportunity because there is no meeting that I'm aware of that night. And then we'll investigate the schools and we'll make the venue decision and the date, time, and so forth early, and then produce the flyer, begin the awareness of, hey, we're having this thing, do the web, and then have the meetings about program.
So the pace of communication is picking up. I encourage all of you to check your city email once a day. Just, you know, just take a look at it, see if there's anything there, so that at least you'll know within a day whether there's something that requires your attention.
I know there's a lot of rules, but to go back and cap it with more rules, anything you produce is a city document, a city effort, whether you choose to do it or not. You're a city representative. If you're doing city work, you're producing it, and it has implications. We can cover it, but then it becomes a workload issue. But just please be aware of that. And then communications, you put yourself at risk by using personal phones, personal laptops, and so forth, personal emails for sure. And it may never matter, but when it does, it's burdensome and it's absolute. It's a city document. It's city work, public records request, and could lead to some very serious risk for the city.
Okay. That will close off the comp plan discussion. Brings us to our second public comment period, to the people patiently waiting to listen or comment.
Say hello. What's the best flavor?
So, Mr. Jordan, were you going to comment again?
Yeah.
Okay.
You guys are right in my wheelhouse of all everything you said.
So as before, 3 minutes, we already know who you are, so jump in.
Okay, I've heard about different properties and the concerns on how they meld. Here's an example, cautionary tale. The Port of Authority and the airport had to sell property to elongate the runways out there. Bodies ended up being discovered on that property, which influenced the sales. That was a private piece of property. One of the people that teamed up with Gary Ridgway and I used to scratch lettuce out there. That was his grandfather's private business. The Christmas tree, the pumpkin patch, the Christmas tree thing, right out there in Burien. I used to work there And matter of fact, he pissed on a light extension thing and just shocked himself. And then they started bringing bodies out there and tried to get me to go, and I wouldn't go anymore. That property is combined now with Port Authority property, private property, private LLC combinations, and all those you don't want to get caught up in here. There's a combination of where the two individual sites are that happened, one underneath the power lines that had sand dumped on it. That was treated differently. I noticed that. The one upstream, that was public. But what about if there's private? You guys are going to want to think about that because you're going to get cheated out of what happened, how to get land reparations, just like the people did and the private owners in Tukwila. If that happens to go your way, you're going to want to know the differences between the power lines, where sand was dumped, where real grade is, and it goes to everything you guys are talking about. Up on Forest Drive, there's a beautiful place. The Homeowners Association might be able to hook you guys up for your meeting. I don't know if you want the public going up there. It has a pool, has a nice slanted parking lot. Omar Vizquel used to live up there. It has a beautiful kitchen. It has a nice floor and a fireplace, and they can put down hardwood floors for you guys. I don't know if you want the public going up there, but it's beautiful. It's way up on the Forest Drive. It's at the very, very peak. You can take a poll in Newcastle and say, how would you feel about exposing the sites where the first 4 bodies came from here in Newcastle? Do you think we should do that for the community? Do you think we should do that for the families? You guys can take a poll for yourself. Don't get caught in that nuanced stuff that's going to come your way about little parcels of land and how they're going to sell them to you, because they're going to want to have motivations you guys should just be aware of. And then it goes into all the trails and naming and the lasting legacies and all the homeland security and everything you guys wanted to talk about. It is in the wheelhouse. It is in your guys' control. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the dates coming up that we should be aware of, I think you're already pretty aware of them. Of course, there's the 21st at 6:30 where we're going to meet with Bill and talk about the open house. Open house itself is on the 26th, and our planning commission meeting is on the 27th. After this meeting, Commissioners Van Natta and Quigg would stay behind. Maybe we can look for a time to talk about social media.
Great.
And with that, we are adjourned.